Okay, well, what an evening and what a atmosphere and a lot of emotions, quite a lot of things to think about, and hopefully the next minutes and moments will be enlightened a little bit by the authors, by the actors. So please, once again, welcome Roald Hoffmann, Oliver Peter Graber, and Stephanie McGuire. Well, it's been a long time, and finally we arrived here with this world premiere. First question I have is, how do you, as the authors and the actors and composers, how do you feel right now? Premiere.
Well, it's amazing how it all comes together, and with all the work by the group and Oliver and Stephanie, and given that we started on the work a while ago, 5-6 years ago, but we had it planned for 2 years ago. But so you stayed with us, and Basel stayed with us, and we're grateful for that.
Oliver.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. It's absolutely great to have the possibility to present Alchemy in this form here. So thank you very much. Also, thank you very much, Professor Tom Ward, for your invitation, for all the work that has been done, all the organizational work and so on. And of course, we both also want to thank our team, so especially medalists that I do not forget. We want to thank the technical team of the Gare du Nord, especially Mr. Mario Henkel, who did the light tonight, Mr. Mikhail Safierovsky, who was our sound engineer, and Mr. Wolfgang Drexler, who is doing the video recordings. And we, of course, want to thank Ada. It's an absolute privilege to work with you, Ada, because you are doing more than 100% in every second. It was absolutely great. And I have to add, she was the very first singer in my career who did not knock at my door at 7 o'clock in the morning shouting, "Oliver, wake up, it's our first day of rehearsals." So thank you very much. I have to go on tour with you. And of course, we want to thank our actors. I especially want to mention Lotta Tassmann, who jumped in the very last moment because her colleague who was planned to play the role got ill. Leslie Löw, who played viola. Christoph Hofer, who was Ilya and is the leader of the whole group. Sam Amann, a great and experienced Lothar, and Nino Nave, our Akira. Thank you all very much. And to answer your question, it's always teamwork, and when it's over, we all are really exhausted, but lucky.
Stephanie, congratulations on playing this part, playing a supercomputer. I know your great love is sacred music, and we think about Mozart and Bach and others, but in a way, this was also sacred music. It was a sacred story.
Yes, absolutely. And it was very special for me because of my background in science. And so, there are stories maybe about, 18th century poetry, or where I would have had to been looking up all the references and what does this mean and what does this mean? But it was super fun as a singer to read through the libretto and kind of remember, oh wow, yes, these are things, like I just love that. And he invented the calculus, so did Leibniz. Like I really love that. So yes, you're right. And it's interesting because I think one of the reasons I love Bach so much is that the music is so formally and structurally put together so well. In fact, some people don't like Bach because they think he's too mathematical, but there's always so much wonderful emotion and harmony in that music. And in the same way, I feel like the scientific basis of this libretto brought it for me into the sacred realm.
How did this all start, Alchemy? Who came up with the idea first, and why? What?
Actually, the composer came up with the idea. here, and he wrote to me out of the blue, essentially, and because of something else we had done, and I saw something in his story which, and the idea of doing an opera or a melodrama or a singspiel was so attractive. So maybe he didn't get the chemistry right the first time, so I was able to help there.
So, Oliver, you wrote to Roald, not knowing him at the time, I suppose, and said, well, would you be interested in writing a libretto or a text to Alchemy? I have this idea. Is that how it all started?
Yeah, that's how the whole story started. And I've always been fascinated by music and science in almost equal measure from my earliest childhood. And make every effort to bring these two worlds and their specific aesthetics together in harmony in every single one of my projects. And during the last 3 decades, I have created more than 24 works on this basis. And Alchemy is another approach because I wanted to include text, and it was perfect. Roald, thank you very much for this fabulous libretto.
And you included also sonification and sounds, which in a secondary way, which maybe you can explain, derive from science as well.
Yeah, I collect data from all forms of science, including medicine, and later on transform them into sound. I sonificate them, and sonification corresponds to visualization only with acoustic means and methods and tools and so on. So it's very exciting to hear nuclear magnetic resonance spectrograms, for example. And I also want to thank a very special friend who came from Vienna today, Professor Robert Conrad from the University of Vienna. He's leader of the NMR group there and is always willing to collect data that I can transform into something completely weird and strange.
Now, Roald, you wrote theater plays and poetry and now an opera. That seems to be a new career you're about to start as a writer. What is the relationship between chemistry and music? Is there any?
Oh, yes, there is. And actually, last night, Jean-Marie Len, who was in the audience, took me to task for not having any music in my talk about abstract art. So there is that abstraction is actually one connection. I just didn't go into it. Music, in some sense, is a very curious thing because it is the most abstract art form there is. The sequence of sounds, and it makes this, the sense is not necessarily what makes it, but yet it has this close tie to the emotions. I think we have something to learn in chemistry, that from how music can touch the emotions, and I think there is a connection. I wished I could explore it more, but I'm not musically trained nor talented. But I try to make the connections.
Mm-hmm. Oliver, would you comment on that relationship between chemistry and music? What is your experience?
It's quite interesting maybe that throughout history, famous physicists tend to become performers. So for example, you all know Planck loved to play the piano, Einstein loved to play the violin, Werner Heisenberg also loved to play the piano, but they are always analytical, recreative. And chemists, and interestingly enough, chemists tend to composition and instrument making. So, for example, Nernst came up with the Neobechstein, which was the very first successful electronic piano in history. Leecher and Hiller came up with the very first score that was generated by a computer. Borodin is one of the most famous composers during the 19th century. Karl Birger Blomdahl, who was educated in biochemistry and living in Sweden, wrote the very first space opera in music history. And last but not least, to mention another very famous name, Edward Elgar. He is not only the most famous British composer, he was also a hobby chemist, and he burned his home twice. And all the musicians was frightened to take part in rehearsals because they always said, whenever you visit him, he is blowing up anything directly into your face.
Stephanie, when we go into a traditional concert, we very often go there because we like the music, we like the lyrics, we like the composer, and we know it all. But this is not only a new piece, but it is a piece about our life and about our future and about what is going on. And we are not sure if what we see is what we want to happen in the future. You're playing Ada as a very sympathetic, a very friendly computer, and I was wondering, well, should I feel sorry for the computer or should I have positive emotions, and lay my arm around her, symbolically speaking? For you as an artist, does that make a difference to work on such a subject that is really up to date, which really touches us all, and that does not have this ancient ring to it? Is that different than interpreting older songs and lyrics?
It's different and the same. So with every role, you look for the performing is in the moment. It's my heart beating in this moment, connecting with your heart's beating in this moment. And so you have to find, no matter, if it's Handel and 18th century, 17th century, whatever, you have to find what's relevant in this moment. But it's definitely easier to do that with a libretto that deals so poignantly with current events, and also music that is modern, but also very beautiful. And so I would say, yes, it was a pleasure to bring so much of myself and my own experience and my own thoughts to this work in a way that isn't possible if I'm maybe playing Rosina from The Barber of Seville or something.
Oliver, how difficult is it to place a piece like that in the cultural offer where you have so many important people to decide on a daily basis, well, we're going to play this, we're not going to play that? This is, I'm sure, not an easy task to go up to a director and say, well, let's play this. I have this new subject here.
Yeah, it's quite new and unusual, and very often artistic directors unfortunately think that the public is intellectually overwhelmed. So it's quite difficult to find a theater who is willing to do such a huge, really huge production, because it was intended to be a big, really big opera in a very old tradition, including choir, including ballet, including huge symphonic orchestra, including
or at least the rock
electronics.
band.
And a rock band on stage, of course, for the Rolling Stones section. And it requires simply a lot of preparations, and also requires sponsors, and it's very difficult to find people who are interested in such new themes.
Yeah, imagine the algorithms and the reagents in really with a rock band banging in the background and dancing to that. So I want the graduate students here to train so that you can audition for that eventual production.
So I guess this is the course named to be in your honor, Headbanging 101, I guess, at the University of Basel. Well, I'm sure a lot of you have comments or perhaps questions regarding what we've seen and heard. So my colleague Alex is there with a microphone. If you just wave your hand
Maybe we can
or
raise the
stand up
lights
and please kindly
so we can
briefly
see.
say who you are and then go ahead. Yes, please.
So, as a student, and upon your advice, someone who will take up a dancing class very soon, I presume, I have one particular question. Couldn't you have made it that, in the end, the students survive and not the professors? I feel a little bit bad for them.
Well, I don't know.
Anybody?
Well, I think that the line was the young went quicker because their immune response, right, was because that was the whole problem, is that the hydrogen bonding energies in the proteins changed, and so there was like all this autoimmune shenanigans going on in the body, and there was a storm of cytokinins. So, you know, the young, they had to go first, unfortunately.
But it's an opera, and at the end of an opera.
At the end of opera, half the people have to be dead, right? So we accomplished that. I'm sorry we killed off the young ones, but at least they killed off the theoretical chemists.
Yes. Over there, please.
Hi, I will take my mask off. Well, my name is Esmeralda. Nice to meet you all, and also thanks so much for your play. It was really a pleasure. My question would be how you relate to each character in the play, because in principle we have like this strict professional, like an organic scientist, which is not, which not trust science, like computational sciences, and we also have the other side, which is like my computer would provide all the information needed, but at the end we are always in the middle, and the question again is how do you relate to each character?
Well, the characters are in part reflect a position that of the theoretical chemist full of hubris here, and the experimental chemist naturally more suspecting of some of the things. There could be that these are in some way based on some historical figures and what they did. Some of you may recognize that. But you begin by perhaps using the characters to establish a certain point of view. But then at some point, and this would be even more true in a novel, the characters acquire their own life in your writing it. And this is so that somehow Akira reflects what I know about what I imagine about one of my Japanese postdocs when they came to my group, okay? But also he becomes something more than that. And that he is able, at least that he's able to express the opposition is a major emotional achievement for him, maybe more so than for a typical American student. And then that he is able to express his love. We had so little time and space to develop some of the characters, for instance, Akira and Viola. But that's always true. There's never enough time in a play to develop all the characters. And this is where the actor's talent comes through. But so that the figures themselves create the roles, and so to some extent.
Yes, over there.
Hello, my name is Luis, and I'm a theoretical chemist, unfortunately. I work with artificial intelligence in chemistry, which is the hot topic, and I found your play showing something really real. But also, I am curious why you decided to represent this divorce between theoretical chemist and experimental chemist. I truly believe that now science is going in a direction where theory and experiment will not be separated anymore. You cannot have only experiments, you need the theory to explain your experiments, and you cannot have only theory, you need the experiments to validate it. And it's really interesting for me that you show this divorce. Why? Why not to show an intermediate character that's in the middle between those two extremes? Thanks.
I agree with you that we come together and we will find a coexistence between artificial intelligence and I would say understanding, or between simulation and understanding. And I am eager to find that compromise, but that's another opera. Okay? And I'm not sure necessarily that opera is the best way to express it. I've written 3 essays on trying to find this with Jean-Paul Malrieux, trying to find this eventual medium that we'll find it. We'll surely find it. Can't do everything.
But as Roald said, we keep space for Alchemy 2, Alchemy 3.
Yes, please. Over here on the left. Hold on a second.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm an experimental scientist, I would say, not a chemist, but biochemist, let's phrase it like that. Thanks a lot for this great performance. I was wondering, so the play ended with you, Ada, saying, I made a mistake. I was wondering, do you consider yourself now a human or a machine? Do you think you made the transition to a human, since in the play you said, if I make a mistake, I'm a human?
Exactly, exactly. So the journey that I and we tried to show was from a very humanoid computer and then into the last scene where she's like really freaking out like a human being would because she made a mistake. And she says, and they're like, oh, you have to make mistakes to be human. And she clarifies, you learn from your mistakes. That's what it is to be human, is to know that you can't go back to the past. You can't change what we did before. Like, we're on track to 1.5 degrees C, right? But the catalysts, they can be stopped. We can go forward in the future. We can make policy now that's gonna avert future disaster. That's what it is to be a human. I mean, I didn't discuss this. That's what okay. So yes, I would say that that's exactly the journey, and he showed it very well through this theme of mistake making. Well, if you want to be human, make a mistake, and then she does the most horrible one imaginable, but in doing so, gains her humanity.
Yeah, Ada, I have to say, is really fascinating because it's also very difficult for her to play the role, because it's humanoid, but not, and it's always in between. On one hand, she's a supercomputer. She really knows everything and can answer everything. Otherwise, I would not have dared to hand down the question to you before. But on also the human factor is not to be underestimated. And from the very beginning, she is not sure, has she already changed into a human form, or is she still the machine? I think that's very interesting in our ages. And artificial intelligence in music is, of course, existing and also very interesting, but the difference to art always has to be underlined. And Ada is very representative for the whole situation in music, where we have nowadays so many algorithms that are generating melodies, but they are also only analytical and recreative and not synthetic creative. And so maybe we will see that during the next years, and that's why I was fascinated by Ada. That is also a reference to Ada Lovelace, the very first programmer in history, and you know, for sure, the programming language Ada. So we try to bring all these elements together, and Roald put so many wisdom in this libretto, and the libretto offers so many levels, so that more or less in every single sentence, you on one hand can find chemical information, on the other hand you can find emotional information, and artistic as well as philosophical information as well. And I think Ada is really a great role on stage, because Ada offers the possibility to read her story and to interpret her story in so many different ways and on so many different levels. And that's exciting for a composer as soon as a librettist is able to offer such a figure. This is a figure that is not black or white, but has so many different colors in between. So once more, thank you and congratulations.
I can't say it better. Thank you very much.
Hello, great play. My name is Dragan. I work as an organic chemist, but I don't know what I am. I wanted to ask about Ada Lovelace, but you already answered that question. My other question is, what caused the mistake? So you had this headache, the first painful headache, and I was wondering what caused it, and now through thinking of it, is it like a necessary product of the creator? Like if humans make something, humans make mistakes, can we make something that does not make mistakes?
Go ahead.
I like we talked about it some, that the algorithms they sort of take on a life of their own, and she says that it's a piece of code that seems to jump from place to place. I feel snippets of code being, you know, where they're not supposed to be, and I really thought of it. I think that's right, that whatever humans make is gonna have some flaws, but I also thought of it in terms of just what happens when you make complex things. You know, if you've got like a big software and 50 engineers working on it and 1 million users using it, things are just gonna interact in ways that you cannot predict, because it's all nonlinear. And so that's how I, as an actor, kind of understood the mistakes, that it was a natural consequence of living in this world, you know, on planet Earth, where there are these nonlinear dynamics happening all the time.
Yeah, you could have imagined that it could be sabotage by someone, but there's no suggestion of that theme. We didn't want to go down that route anyway. More of something being inherent in the complexity, just like Stephanie said. I mentioned chaotic behavior and bifurcations. It might be surprising that Ada would not know about instability in differential equations. That's by now part of a general education of applied mathematicians, and She would likely know about this, but she still has this confidence that she can spot those things, and so does Bianca, and they miss something. And I don't know exactly, but it's a good question where this mistake comes from. It seems to be a natural consequence of the complexity.
Thank you very much for the great performance. My name is Maria, and I'm a material scientist. So my question was that Ada can create a lot of things. She understands a lot of things. She feels the smells. She creates the poems. But she doesn't create the experimental design. So basically, in terms of experiments, she's always navigated and led by human. So why was it important for you?
Well, she does. You know, it's an opera. It's a fable in part. She does make in that vial. She makes the mystical antidote to whatever the catalyst did wrong. So she does make something. She is also involved in the experimental work, but there is some inconsistency. You're right in spotting that initially she does just the calculations, but maybe she's learned something from Bianca about the robotics, and somehow she can also, in part of what she does, make things. In part, I saw this when I wrote this, it was just a little thing I wrote in about textiles. That I was trying to describe synesthesia, a mixture of different senses, and I wanted to get texture. So now I was thinking about how to build a synestheticon. I don't know how to build a synestheticon, but I imagined somehow, and it's hard to imagine how, texture coming out of a computer. And so I thought of making textiles, at least, that you could integrate into a composition. So it was making something at that point. And the smells are molecules, aren't they?
Good evening, my name is Matthias. Thank you very much for your performance tonight. I'm a bit curious and thrilled by your topic, the artificial intelligence and the machine learning, because personally I think this is one, I think, of the, let's call it a bit blunt, hottest topics in science right now, because you can see how much development goes. I'm a chemist by training, I also work as an industrial chemist, and I see also all the trends which you can observe like in all fields. I think there's like things possible in the future which we can't imagine right now. And I think there's like infinite possibilities and opportunities, but also personally, I think also risks. And that's why I think we will come to the point most likely where exactly we'll be at this, let's say, break-even point, which you showed tonight, that machines will be like so developed, so smart that they will indeed like be independent. And I'm very curious, as like you thought about a lot for your plot, is it something we should look forward? Is it something we should be scary? And also, what do you think will be like? Because I think the development we will not be stopped. It will come. It will happen. And I'm just very curious. What do you think how the life will be in this type of environment? How will we be, let's say, organized regarding ethics and facts like this? How will it be? I'm very curious about your opinion on this topic. Thanks.
Well, the topic interests me a lot, and I've written, as I said, a little about it, or a lot. I share entirely your general situation of where we are, of infinite possibilities and great danger. the infinite possibilities will happen. We seem to be unable to apply cautionary principles to avoid them happening. We have another test in climate change ahead of us. We passed one on the ozone hole. Not so sure about the climate change. But I think that what will happen, and people will, chemists in particular, or scientists, will evolve a way of living with artificial intelligence. The silly epistemological claims, what I mean by that is that calculating a number right means understanding something. That will pass. But the more serious claims, the more serious intrusions of artificial intelligence into the scientific and into human life in general will remain with us. We will somehow evolve a way, and I am somehow romantically inclined to think that introducing the artificial intelligence into the way that scientists will work will enhance the creativity of the scientists, so that we see some aspect of regaining what is special about science, which we sometimes have lost. I'm not being very clear, but we need to talk about this some more. I think that the artificial intelligence will enhance the creativity of science, will make, in some way, science more like art in various ways, and it will eventually lead to what I would like to call a resacralization, a recognition of what is special about the knowledge and understanding that we gain in science, which is a spiritual good and not just a way to improve to live longer for a while or to get better textiles. I think there is something much more about science, and somehow I think the artificial intelligence may help us. I don't have it well formulated.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. There's one over here in the middle. Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Vanessa. Thank you very much for this wonderful production. The name of your production is called Alchemy. So alchemy is change from one thing into something else. Could you maybe elaborate on the various changes that occur in your production, both in terms of matter and in terms of psychology and mental changes?
No, you can say so. It's interesting that you focus away from the hubris of alchemy, which we've talked about and which is worked out in the play. There were transformations. I already hinted at one about how I transformed Oliver's original idea into something else. So this is now something about collaboration, and I love it when it's creative, as it was in this case. Ada was there originally. The only other survivor, I'm giving away secrets, the only other survivor from the original plan was Lothar's name. Didn't want to let go of that. But it was transformed. And in the writing of the libretto, I what changed was I began to think about how we can, these sound like technical things, but they are transformative. How do you write an aria? Okay, so what distinguishes an aria from other things? And I talked to some composers about this, and I was given some advice, like to, first of all, also I listened, so you allow repetition. Putting lots of vowels is a good idea. And there are other things, but it transformed, thinking about the simple thing of repetition of words and allowing the space for that to happen in the text made me think in a different way about Ada. And now along comes Stephanie, and you know, we didn't write it in that she should stutter when the computer freezes. But she did it, and by God, it's going to stay in, written into the thing, because it's part of developing the character of Ada, that should be acted out. So things change.
Yeah, so whenever you are working with a librettist or also with a choreographer, it's more or less like playing ping pong, and ideas are created and you have to work on it. It's really, really difficult to write a functional libretto, because as soon as you start to write a libretto, you have to think about rhythm, you have to think about singability. And I'm very glad and also very thankful that, for example, the text Roald created for the arias is really compact and short. You all know the situation in the opera. As soon as a person is going to die, she or he starts to sing for another 30 minutes. And I was very, very happy that it was always straight to the point. So we had a lot of discussions on how to avoid specific combination of words or of rhythms that would not really be singable, and that's the most important aspect. And the most difficult and the most dangerous thing in theater in general is the overall length of a composition and of a play. As soon as it gets too long, it simply gets boring, and you always have to cut slices away or just to avoid another 100 bars, only to repeat something that has been stated in the first act, for example. And there is a very famous statement, the very best proof that Lorentz transformation and the dilatation of time is in existence is the opera Parsifal by Richard Wagner, because usually Parsifal performances start exactly at 6 o'clock, and 3 or 4 hours later you have a look and it's always exactly 10 minutes past 6. So
yes, time for one last question. Lady up there. Da. Michel kommt.
Congratulations. So what is the next step if you don't have to set yourself any limit? Where are you going to show and in what context? And there was a lot of talk about artificial intelligence tonight, but I've had the luxury of being able to step into some of the laboratories. And what has inspired you, and where would you take it from here? And I had a visit yesterday. I went to visit a friend of mine, a patient, who just had an operation, and I saw him 3 weeks ago, and he was he could barely move. But anyway, what I think is so extraordinary about the expression between the limitless way of expression of art and science, and basically the part of engineering life of the things that have really make incredible amount of progress is motion. And where would you take the second chapter of this? And when I hear your voice, it reminds me very much of somebody I met several times, and was a great hero. My name is Ima Sumak. He passed away, but you have this kind of range. If you don't set yourself any limits, what would be the next opera you would write? And thank you for doing this. It's quite wonderful.
Well, we all have ideas. I have I have an idea for a play which could be an opera, but I haven't written as such. It has to do with a story I heard from Japan, and that is of a, so this is, the next step in this case is nothing to do with artificial intelligence. I haven't been able to come up with an idea around it. This is a play about a Japanese mountain god, Hitokoto Nishi, who answers questions phrased in one word, and he answers it with one word. But he also falls under the spell of a Buddhist ascetic, so this is something about conflict between religious systems in Japan. But the Buddhist ascetic commands this mountain god to build a bridge between Nara and Yoshino in the mountains in Japan. And the god builds that bridge, but it says in that story, which goes back to medieval times, that he built the bridge only at night because he didn't want people to be frightened by his appearance during the day. I thought that was so interesting. That a god, and they look like they should scare you, they look like the guardians at an entrance to a Japanese temple, that this god should have the sensitivity to not to want to frighten human beings. I thought, there's a story that's worth telling. And what I meant was imagining why such a god might come to that state. For instance, he could have fallen under the spell of a woman, the god is male, and here, that doesn't have to be, and he took another guise in the way that Greek gods took, and then at night he woke up and she saw his true face and she ran away. Well, that would be one reason why he wouldn't want to show his true face. But also that a god, a symbol of power and such, would be sensitive enough. That to me is a story that's universal and worth telling. And it's something about human nature and gods. So that's, I'm telling you a story I would like to turn into a play or an opera.
And of course, we still have the wish that we can transform the stage again with Alchemy and that we are able to realize the original big version.
Well, what an evening, what an exciting and informative talk. And how nice that the last question came from Michel Comte. This was by no way planned, but he's the author of the book we are about to give to you as a present tonight. Michel has recently published a book about a cooperation project with our NCCR, and it's called Engineering Life and Us, and it kind of looks like a Bible. And it's all about what we are doing, and Michel has been with us for 2 years, so thank you, Michel, for being here and producing this book together with us. I would like to give this to you, and with the curtain closed and all questions open, I want to thank you all, Stephanie, and Oliver and Roald, for an outstanding evening and performance, and also Prinz Ip, the artist here from Basel. Thank you all very, very much, and thank you, the audience. We need the audience, we need the discussions. That's why we are doing this. Get in touch, talk about science and art, and see where it takes us. And we hope to see you now at the bar. Thank you very much.